I never had attitude outwardly toward any managers ever, but inwardly I was like, screw this, like I don't want to be here, this is awful. You guys, like, sure, write that email, get it out, like write it all down, tell those managers what for, but then you delete that email or you just send it to yourself. Don't send it to your job. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Sydney Phipps and I am a sporadic video poster here on YouTube. So today I want to talk about 10 lessons that my crappy jobs taught me. And I don't mean that disrespectfully to like any job that you might be working currently. Every job is a great job. Hard work is good. I'm not trying to like belittle any jobs. I think jobs are for seasons of your life, and one of my most favorite jobs ever was working at a bank, and I would never like frown upon an hourly job that has like mundane tasks, because sometimes those jobs can be enjoyable. Like sometimes you're happier in those jobs than you would be if you had $1 million business. So I don't mean it to like make it sound like they're crappy. I mean it to say like I just hated some of these jobs, and these are the kind of jobs that a lot of people would consider like hourly stepping stone jobs that you have while you're in college or in early seasons of your life. So I'm just prefacing all of that, but if you enjoy your job, then it doesn't matter what kind of job that is. Like if you're a happy garbage man, then you've made it. So I'll just go through my job history really quick and we'll cover what I've learned. So my first job was a Mexican food restaurant. I was a hostess, then I got promoted to server. We'll talk about that. It was called Casaritas. Then my next job was Bye Bye Baby. So I had moved into the retail space. My next job was Cafe Flair. After that, I was like a barista and bubble tea person who made drinks and crepes and stuff. Then I worked at In-N-Out, which was only for 2 weeks. We'll talk about that. Then I worked at Kumon. It's a Japanese learning center for about 2 years. I worked at a place called the Simmons Center when we moved to Oklahoma. That was a gym and like a health club. I think I worked there for like a year. And I also started working at a bank after that. Like I worked 2 jobs at this point in my life, called Legacy Bank. And then I started working at Starlight, a sign company, when I moved back to Texas. And then now I have been a freelancer for the past 5 years working for myself. So we're gonna cover all these topics now. So the first one and huge one that I think was super helpful for me was learning how to handle harsh criticism. So I didn't have a job till I was 18, and that's because my dad did not want me to work. He wanted me to focus on school. And I actually went and got a job against my parents' wishes. When they gave me a car, I drove to like get my first job because I just wanted that responsibility. I felt like it was time for me. And because of that, my dad ended up saying, well, okay, if you want to be so responsible, then you're going to learn how to pay some bills. So he started charging me like $250 a month to rent my bedroom, I guess. And a lot of people might think that that sounds harsh and kind of like, I don't know, like a lot of money for a high schooler to be paying. But I think it taught me a lot of good principles early on. And that was that I had to go to work. Like I didn't just get to work for fun. Like I had to go to work so that I could pay my dad and also pay for the things in my life. So the first major lesson that I learned was how to deal with harsh criticism. And this hit me in the face, y'all, because I had just been a student my whole life before this. A huge thing that I learned, like this was like day 2 on the job as a hostess. The big boss came in, and this guy, I swear you guys, was like 5 feet tall, maybe like 4'9", and I'm 5'7", which I don't know, I look pretty tall as a girl, and so I could really like look down at this little man, but it didn't matter that he was small because this guy was scary. Like everybody like straightened up around this guy, everyone was like nervous around him. And so the first or second day of that job, he had all of us hostess girls like pretend to take a family to a table. And so I would like look behind me and be like, how are you tonight? Like, what did you guys do this weekend? Blah, 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 like making small talk on the way to their table and explaining some menu items or something like that. So I took the people to the wrong table. Like I went around the whole restaurant and realized that I had already passed the table and I had to come all the way back around to that table. And mind you, the big boss is at the front with all of us little hostess girls, and he's watching me go around the whole restaurant and then come back around to them and seat the family. It was all like practice scenarios. And this little man, you guys, like looked me dead in the face and goes, "What, are you stupid?" And I was like what? Like, I've never been treated like that before. Thankfully, I've been treated pretty well the majority of my life. I've never been bullied. I've never had anyone be like blatantly rude to me. So that was kind of a wake up call. I don't know, just that like, "What, are you stupid?" And I was like, no, I recognized that I took them to the wrong table. Like, it was a mistake. And he just didn't care. He kind of like ripped me a new one. I can't even remember what he said, but he was like, "Get your head out of the clouds and focus," like as if this was just some life changing, altering thing that I had to seat people at their tables and it had to be correct. But I realized that that guy is just a pretty angry man, and he treated everybody like that. Everyone was miserable around him. So it was just him taking out his personality on people and his hurts, probably. I say all of that to say there was more harsh criticism along the road from other bosses and stuff. I was in color guard, and I was always like working with mats and flags and rifles and stuff. And one day I had like a lot of dirt under my fingernails, which is disgusting. Like, another boss one day like saw my fingers on the table, and he was like, "Oh my God, your fingernails are so gross. Like, can you go wash those or something?" And just like the way that people speak, I wasn't used to. Like, it was so harsh, like just not a gentle way to speak to somebody. And I like went and cried in the bathroom after that, like, "Oh my gosh, like why are people so rude?" But you know what? It really caused me to realize, like, you don't have to take these things personal. These people are like rough around the edges. You're working in these like hourly job situations, and there's going to be a lot of people who just aren't happy with their lives. So they have to so they're just not gentle people. So that was a huge lesson that I learned. I can't think of a lot of situations. There was another time where this lady threw some D batteries at me at my retail job, and she was so pissed. Like, she wanted to talk to the manager, and then when I offered to get the manager, she was like, "No, I don't want to talk to him." And then she like threw these D batteries at me, like shoved them across the thing, and they like hit me pretty hard. And I was like, oh, like that's scary. So it just taught me that there's a lot of like angry people out there, and you don't have to give into it. You don't have to like respond with attitude back. And it doesn't mean that you're like a doormat. Like, there are times where I have spoken up for myself, especially during my learning center job that I'll talk about. But other times I just learned to keep my mouth shut and let it roll off. Like, I'm rubber, you're glue, whatever bounces off of me bounces back and sticks to you, or whatever kind of cheesy crap like that. But for real, like, just learn to take it and move on. And you'll be more mature because of it, and you need to learn not to treat people like that. Don't let someone else's like bad energy and bad feelings toward themselves get onto you, and then you start to treat people like that. It's a huge measure of a person whenever you can like take that stuff without absorbing it and still be kind to others. So that was a huge lesson that I learned from my crappy jobs. Lesson number 2, I learned how to not take things personally. So that kind of goes with number 1, but I'll just say a few things. Like, say someone was in a bad mood around me. I never automatically thought that it had to do with me. And I know that there's some people who do. Like, I worked with a bunch of women at a bank, and women are the worst about this. Just like the catty atmosphere that can exist between girls. And they'll just be like, "Oh, so-and-so looked at me wrong." Or like, "Did you see the way she walked in here today?" Like, I learned to never engage in talk like that. I would listen to the people who were offended and who were speaking like that, because you can't escape it. And I've wondered, I've been like, Jesus, like, what do I do in these situations? But I've learned that you just have to kind of listen to that without feeding it. Do not feed all of that negativity. There's a way to like turn it around, or like say, "Oh yeah, well maybe so-and-so is just tired," or maybe so-and-so just had a fight with their husband. Like, we really don't know what's going on. I know there have been days that I went into work carrying like the weight of the world on my shoulders from our marriage and from family situations and stuff, and I didn't want to talk to anybody, or I was just more like melancholy in my expressions that day, or like I wasn't as excited to talk to customers. And that's not good that you would like show that at your job, but honestly, we're all human and we have to have grace for each other. So I learned to not take things personal. Everyone's dealing with their own struggle. don't fixate on things, don't gossip about people behind the scenes, because it really does nothing in the end. It really is just showing how weak of a person that you are, and you need to expand your views and realize that the world is not all about you. It's not all about how someone should treat you, but actually we should be the ones just working on treating others well regardless of how they treat us. Lesson number 3 that I learned, integrity. And I've learned integrity all throughout my life. My dad would talk about it a lot. But I feel like at a job, it really challenges this area for you, because there's so many situations where you have to do a task or something that management has given to you. And for lack of a better word, you can half-ass it if you want, or you can do it to the best of your ability, and you can do it with integrity. And you can realize that it doesn't matter if people are watching, you're gonna do the same job regardless. And if you do that, you will always be covered. You won't have to worry about someone like getting onto you and finding out later that you didn't stock something correctly, or that you like kind of fudged on some numbers. Like, don't do that. Like, then you never have to live in fear that someone's going to call you into the office. I learned early on to just do things the right way, because I saw a lot of people get called in or something and realize like, oh man, like they didn't take their task seriously, and they might have just goofed off during it, or maybe something took them way longer than it should have. Management sees that. Like, their job is to manage you. And so they're not stupid. And like, you might have gotten away with it at previous jobs, but that will go with you. Like, you'll carry that kind of work ethic with you, and eventually you're gonna get caught or found out, and it's just not worth it. Like, just do things right, do them right the first time. And if you don't know how to do it, ask for help. I'll say that I really learned that at my bank job. Because at a bank, there's no room for error. There's no room for you to do something wrong. Like, the Federal Reserve watches banks, and they make sure that they're auditing them and making sure that everything is in its place. Like, it's black and white. There's no like, oh, it's a little bit off, or like, let's just round the numbers up. Like, no, it is exact. And so I just learned, like, do it the right way, and you will always have good experiences with your job and with your managers, because that's the kind of people that they want around them. Okay, number 4, this was a huge one. Show up when you don't feel like it. And you do that again and again and again and again, day in, day out, week in, week out, holiday in, holiday out. Like, I worked Christmas Day sometimes, and that was a good lesson for me to learn. Like, this is what you have to do. This is what grown-ups do. This is what adults do. You do the thing that you don't feel like doing because you have to. Like, there's just no option. And you can choose to like call in, you can choose to be sick, you can choose to make excuses, but that's really not good for your own character in the long run. I found that I reaped so much like character building and just like, I keep saying big girl panties, but you just have to put your big girl panties on and do things over and over and over again, whether you want to or not. You have to just swallow your pride, do what the manager told you to do, whether you agree with it or not. You have to stay those late hours. Say someone messed up the restaurant, someone like put rice all over the floor, or at my retail job, the whole store is just a mess after Black Friday. No one's going home until that store is clean. No one's going home till that restaurant is clean, till every last person is involved in getting that place back up to the standards that corporate would have it at. And it sucks. Like, I remember one time I complained to a coworker, because so at my retail job, we had walkie-talkies, and we were this close to leaving the store. Like, our manager was on the walkie, and she was like, all right guys, about 5 more minutes of zoning and then we're out of here. But then this girl came on the walkie and she goes, oh, so-and-so, like, to our manager, did you see this wall over here? Like, it looks horrible. I was just like, oh, like, what? Like, who said that? Like, oh my gosh, I want to go home. It's 11 p.m. at night. I have classes in the morning because I was going to school and working at the same time. And then someone wanted to be a little like goody two shoes and get on the microphone and get on the walkie and like talk about this wall that the opening people could have easily fixed up. And so I was just like, bleh, like so pissed. And I turned to this girl, like, as we were headed there, I was like, can you believe that? Like, whoever said that, like, because I didn't think it was her, but it happened to be her. She was like, that was me. And I was like, oh, sorry. So I just realized, like, oops, like, you know what? She meant well. Like, she cared about her job. Although I do think she was a kiss up to the manager, and that's why she said that. But Regardless, literally it was just 3 more minutes with all of us over there cleaning it up. But I just learned to like do the thing that you don't want to do. Like just do it, because it's not all about you. That is just such a great thing to learn. And now that I'm a mother and I have a 1-year-old running all over the place, like I never really get to do what I want to do anymore. So that has been a lesson that I've learned 1,000 times over by now. But it started way back when. And I'll say that that skill, if you can just learn to pony up and just do the thing that you don't want to do instead of fussing about it, like that will just make your life so much easier the rest of your life. Like you will take it with you until you die. Okay, and number 5, this is like such a great tip. I love this tip, this lesson that I learned, but I learned that I was meant for more. I learned that I was meant for so much more than just stocking shelves and running orders and working with kids. I learned that I was so much more than just my job, and that I could take my purpose into my job. Find that thing that you would do for free and you'll never work a day in your life, which I'll say I even have kind of like my dream job right now. And guys, it's still work. It's still a lot of work. And I wasn't just created to be a wedding videographer, but there's purpose outside of that that I take into those jobs. And that's what ultimately gives you fulfillment. So I just learned that this was just a paycheck most of the time, and it was a stepping stone to get to where I was going. Even in this job that I have right now, I recognize that this is just stepping stones to higher places and like the good things that God has for us and our family, like the dreams that He's put in our hearts. Like these jobs are just like stepping stones to that, and you nothing will be wasted if you really hunker down and take what you can from each of these jobs. All right, and number 6, I learned that I was super immature sometimes, that there were things that I just could not handle, and things that I really needed to grow up about and get a grip on. And one of those was whenever I got promoted to server, I trained for about 2 weeks. It was good with a trainer, but then when they let me loose on my own, I really struggled with that. Like, I don't know if I'm just not cut out to be a server. To this day, I'm still like, this is just not for me. There are plenty of other jobs on the planet. Serving is not one of them, not one of my strengths. Like I just sucked at it. I was forgetful. People would ask me to do the simplest thing and I would just be like so overwhelmed with like all the requests, and I just couldn't figure it out. And I see servers, I'm like, it's really not that hard, but for some reason with me, it's not my strong suit. So when I got promoted to server, I probably worked as a server for about 3 weeks. And there was one day they gave me the whole patio. They sat me the whole patio, which was like, I think 12 tabletops, and there was no one seated on the patio yet, but I just saw that and I was like, no, I'm not doing it. And I was just angry. And I had worked at that job for probably 6 months, and that's when I walked out on the job. I just left. I like took my apron off, put it down, walked out the door with tears in my eyes, and got in my car and like bawled my eyes out, because I was just like, I don't want to work there. Like I hate it. Like this is awful. So I just learned that that was like kind of an immature thing that I did. I could have gone to somebody and said, I'm not ready for this. Like, can someone help me? Put me back on the hostess stand, like do anything. But instead I was just immature. I was emotional, and I just walked out on that job, and I lost that reference, which I want to talk about that next. I think that's not the next one, but I'll move on to the next one. There were several tears shed over the years that I worked these crappy jobs. Like I remember going into corners, into bathrooms, into closets, and just crying because I was like, this is so hard. Like, why is management so tough? Like, why are customers so difficult? Like all of these things. Why are my coworkers hard to work with? Just all of this stuff. And I'm not one to ever beef out with a person like face to face. Like I just won't argue. I'll just do it. But internally I'll be dying inside and I'll go cry somewhere. So I just realized like, man, I've got some things to work on. Like I need to grow up. And one lady even told me that, like, she was like, Sydney, you've got to realize that they don't need you here. Like if you don't want to be here, just leave. And she kind of like made me realize that I was getting so worked up over something that just, if I wasn't happy there, I could just move on, and I needed to move on because other people were happy to be there. I was the miserable one in some instances. And then, okay, so my In-N-Out job, I worked there for 2 weeks and that was it. They told me that I needed to smile more and that I couldn't wear nail polish. And this was another immature, like, I don't want to work here type job. They got on to me while I was entering orders for wearing nail polish. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, I'm sorry. And then another lady like pulled me aside in a closet and she was like, hey, everyone can see your pink bra through your white In-N-Out uniform. You need to go home and change. And I was like, really? Like, okay. So then, which granted, they can do what they want. Like they can tell me that I'm doing something wrong. Like they have every right to do that. I was just having attitude, not directly to them, but within. I never had attitude outwardly toward any managers ever, but inwardly I was like, screw this. Like, I don't want to be here. This is awful. You guys want me to smile all the time. Like, I'm not just a smiley person. And I really wasn't. Like, they wanted me to like pour shakes and be like, pouring a shake, smiling. And you know, those In-N-Out people are freaking awesome. Chick-fil-A people, y'all are great. I am not cut out to be just like this happy robot. Like, that's just not me. My husband loves that stuff. He worked at Chick-fil-A. He was a great happy robot. So if you like that kind of stuff, like, do it. But I just didn't like In-N-Out, and I'm so glad I left and I moved on to like the next thing. But it's things like that, like you don't have to work there if you don't want to. Like, move on quickly and figure out what you should be doing. Yeah, and that was lesson number 7, that I just didn't have to be there if I didn't want to be. I should choose to be there. And that kind of that contradicts my other one where it says like show up again and again and do the thing that you don't want to do. But also, like, I don't like working in food. Like, I hate it. I will never go back to work in food unless I absolutely have to. But then I found that I liked retail. But like, I loved working retail jobs. I love walking all over the store. I love stocking products. Like, that's fine. It's not a dream job by any means, but I just realized like I didn't have to be at these food jobs if I didn't want to be. Like, there's other jobs out there that if you don't want to be there, find something that you do want to do and do it well. And then I just want to like bless this lady, Jerry. Like, if she's watching this, there are some things that she said in 5 minutes that just would change my life for the rest of forever. And one of them was the whole thing like, Sydney, you don't have to be here. And she meant it in the nicest way. Like, she was supplementing some of her husband's and hers income with this extra retail job, so she didn't really need it. She was just doing it to have some extra money, probably to like pay off a car or something, like pay off some debt. So she was happily there. Like, she was there with a good attitude, and she was like, Sydney, if you're not happy, like, you should do something that makes you happy. And I was like, oh, you're right. Like, ugh, thank you. And then another thing that she said, because I was complaining about this one manager that just was on me all the time. I don't know why. She was super short also. I don't know why I have a thing with like super short people. Literally, she was probably 4'9". So I towered over her, but this lady could make me feel like an ant on the ground that was like squished. Because she would like get onto me over the walkie-talkie, and she would just make me feel horrible, and she would like belittle me. Even about like my hobbies. She saw on social media that my husband and I would go fishing a lot, and she like made fun of me for fishing, and just the small little things that when you're a vulnerable little 19-year-old or 18-year-old, whatever I was, it just like hurt my feelings. And to this day, I'm like, man, that's so stupid. Like, the woman I am now would just like not even care what she was saying. Like, but at the time I did. I was a little girl. I was complaining about Fawn, the lady's name was Fawn, to Jerry, and Jerry said, Sydney, I'm gonna tell you something. This is the end of the road for her, probably, because Fawn was like well into her 40s or 50s or something. And she was like, this is the end of the road for her. Like, you have so much life ahead of you. You're only 18, you're only 19, whatever age I was. And she was like, this isn't it for you. Like, you have so much more coming. And I was like, what? Like, in that moment, you just feel so stuck because you're like in school and paying bills and working these long hours every single day. And like your job and your school just becomes everything. And I just couldn't see it then. It's like you live like this whenever you're like 18, 19. But now that I have like a kid and a family, like my whole like, I feel like my life is already over. Like, I can see myself when I'm 70 because I just have a big picture view now. But I had a very small picture view when I was younger. And for Jerry to just say like, Sydney, this is it for her. Like, that's why she's so grouchy. Like, she's not happy with this because she has her degree, she's in management, and she probably doesn't make enough, and she works all these hours. She's probably not happy with her marriage because this lady did complain about her husband a lot. And she's just kind of like a mean lady who's just dissatisfied with her life. And that's why she takes this out on everybody. And I was like, oh, like, oh my gosh, like, thank you. Thank you so much. And if anything, Jerry helped me realize to like have compassion for those people. That was a shift that I still carry with me to this day. Like whenever I see someone acting out or just being dumb, I am just like, man, I'm sorry. Like, I'm sorry for whoever hurt you. And I hope that you heal from that. And I'm not going to make it any worse by having attitude. I'm just going to like take it and move on and like be the bigger person. So that was a great lesson. That, if you don't take anything else from this video, just learn that. All your managers who are grouchy and like just are horrible leaders who get a power trip at these dumb little hourly jobs, like don't take that wrong, but just look at it like that. Like this is like a height for them. This is the top for them in their career, and maybe they're just not happy with it. And a lot of them are, thankfully. Like I see so many great managers, but a lot of them are dissatisfied with where they are, just like you are. Okay, I don't know what number I'm on, but for number 8, I said work with difficult and different people. And I want to really hone in on the different part. Like when you're in the workforce like that, you get to work with so many different people. And notice I said get to. So like now that I'm a freelancer, I don't get to work with a whole lot of different people unless it's like a wedding day. But the majority of my life is spent at home with my daughter, editing. And then on wedding days, there's a whole slew of diversity and stuff. But I loved the people at most of my jobs. Like I just loved my coworkers. I loved getting to work on the challenge of loving someone who's difficult. But I'm a 9 on the Enneagram, so like that's fun for me. For some people like my husband, it's just not fun to have to like stretch and be everything to everyone. But I loved that. So I'll say that that's a huge lesson that I took. Because in high school it's very like cliquish, and you kind of surround yourselves with people that are like you. But with my crappier jobs, I got to work with people who were in their 40s, people who had like been in the military, people who had lived overseas, people who had lived in one place their whole life. And you just see like all these different types of people all be in one place, and we're forced to work as a team under one company. And it was just a beautiful thing. It was great. Most of my jobs, I can say that was like just an awesome thing. And especially for my learning center job, I am so grateful for that job because I got to work for 2 Indian men, and it was just like these 2 Indian men and me at the start, and it was just such a great time, such a rich time for me to like really soak in their culture, and they were such sweet people. I got to really hear about like how they're raised and how their parents treated them and how they treat their children, and not look at it like from a standpoint where I'm like judging it, but looking at it from a standpoint of learning. Like I learned so much from them. And one of the men was an extreme atheist, like huge atheist. Like he wanted to save me from being a Christian. He was like, you've got to stop believing in that stuff. Like that's so stupid. Like be enlightened and all this stuff. And we had the best conversations because we were always just bouncing ideas back and forth. And we found so many awesome things to talk about. We talked about faith, we talked about politics, and we were probably on opposite ends of the spectrum, but we found a middle ground. And to this day, like if I saw Raj, I would like run up and hug him because he is the sweetest man, and I just really grew to love them like a family. And I just love that I got to have that experience, because without working an hourly job like that, I wouldn't have gotten to meet people like that. Another job where I worked with someone that was slightly difficult was my cafe flair job. I worked for 2 German people. It was a German couple. They were literally like fresh immigrants from Germany, and I loved them dearly. They were very sweet. They spoke limited English, and she was very, very harsh. Like she was not nice, but thankfully she liked me because I really tried to keep it straight with her. Like I was like tried to do everything right, but when I didn't do something right, she would just like shake her head, or like if I made a smoothie wrong, she would like dump it out angrily and like make me wash it. or she would tell me to go. Like one time she told me to just leave, and I was like, okay. And then I called her and was like, is it okay for me to come back to work tomorrow? And she was like, oh yes, Sydney, like we would love to have you back in. So I just had to learn, like, she is just like that, and I didn't have to work there for forever. It was definitely a stepping stone from one job to the next, and I just learned how to have grace with her, and it ended up being a really good job in the end. I came back to visit her regularly after I left, and I would get bubble tea from there because they made the best bubble tea, you guys. It was so freaking good. But she would smile every time. She'd give me a big hug. So I feel like I left that job on good terms, even though she was very difficult to work with. There was even one time that someone came into the restaurant because they had to pee so bad. And she like yelled at them to leave her restaurant because she was like, unless you're buying food here, you're not going to go to the restroom here, which is probably customary in Germany or like Europe. I think there's even places where you have to like pay to go to the restroom. But here in America, like if you want to go pee, like you can go pee. You don't really have to be a patron of the establishment. Like there's just kind of like some freedom here in that. I don't know. So that was one thing where I was like scared of her, where I was like, man, why didn't she just let that guy go pee? Like that was rude. But it was fine. Ooh, this is a quick one that I'll share. I love that I took this skill with me, and that is how to nail interviews. Because with these jobs, you put a bunch of applications out there. And so I interviewed at several different places. I got several offers back, but I got to like choose the jobs that I wanted to go to. And a lot of my interviews ended up being very conversational, like funny, like make people laugh. They make me laugh, find relatable points. And I thought interviews were scary at first. Like I thought an interview was like me having to prove something to these people. But honestly, people just want to work with people that are fun to work with. They want to work with people that are hard workers, but they can teach you anything. You don't even have to know why you want to work somewhere. Like that's a common question that they ask, like, why do you want to work for whatever company? And most of the time I was like, well, I want to work here because I'm going to school and I need to pay my bills. And sometimes that's a good enough answer. Like I was never looking for a career from these jobs that I was going into, and they knew that. But if anything, they were looking for people that would be teachable and people that would be fun to work with. I just learned how to nail interviews, and to this day, I'm pretty much interviewed by every single couple that I am their wedding videographer for. And y'all, I don't want to brag, but I feel like I nail it every time. Like within 2 minutes on the phone, we're laughing, we're having a moment of connection that I feel like is what gives my couples the confidence to hire me. Okay, and this kind of connects to the last one of the points from earlier, how I walked out on that job. But I also learned how to not burn bridges and how to like take that job with me into the next reference. So I didn't ever reference that first job, but I learned like, oh man, I just wasted 6 months at that job without being able to use it as a reference since I walked out. So I learned to never do that again. Like I just don't do that. I leave on good terms. I do that with all of my couples as well. I make sure that there's still open lines of communication, and that there was like, that we left on really good terms. I always put in at least a 2 weeks notice, and I shook their hands at the end and said, thank you for hiring me. Thank you for teaching me all of these things. I will definitely take that into my next season. And so that's a huge one. Like, please just have the maturity, stick it out. I don't care how much you hate that job. There were jobs that I hated that I put in my 2 weeks, and I wanted to write this long email like, and by the way, after working here, blah, blah, blah. Like, sure, write that email, get it out, like write it all down, tell those managers what for, but then you delete that email, or you just send it to yourself, send it to a friend. Don't send it to your job. Put that big fake smile on, shake their hand, and let it be a bridge that can take you into your next season. That way, whenever your next job calls up a reference, you have good things that can be said about you that can possibly land you your next job. Okay, and last one, I think this is number 11. I learned what I wanted in a future job. I learned that I hated sitting. So one of my jobs at the sign company was sitting in a dark cubicle with fluorescent lighting, and it was lonely. It was just boring. It was staring at a computer screen all day. It was very sedentary, so I definitely put on a few pounds because this one man always kept candy bars on his desk, and everyone would go get the candy, and they would bring donuts all the time. I learned that I didn't like that. I don't want that in a job. I didn't want to be sitting around all the time by myself with a computer. It paid pretty decent, but that wasn't good enough for me. I was not happy. I was very miserable there. And out of that misery is what birthed my dream to be a videographer. But then I will say, like, my bank job, I got to stand all the time. I got to work with money and try to be exact and like balance a drawer every day, which is pretty satisfying. I got to work with customers through the drive-through and face-to-face. I got to work with coworkers all around me. It was a great job. I would definitely go back to work at a bank if I had nothing else. I just love bank hours. You're off on Sundays. So like if you hate working on the weekends, don't work somewhere like Walmart, because they are like open all the time and you're gonna be pissed with that schedule. Like my husband worked at Walmart and he worked at IKEA, and he always had to work on the weekends and he always had to work on holidays. And just don't put yourself through that stress. Like don't put yourself in the position to like want to call in all the time. Like work something that fits the life that you want to live. All right, guys, that was kind of a long video, but this is an idea that I've had in my head for years and I just wanted to get it out because I think it's helpful. If you are in a place where you hate your job, or you're trying to figure out like which hourly thing you're gonna switch to next, or like when you're gonna launch that YouTube channel, or when you're gonna launch your freelancing thing, I'll say that when I worked that last job at the sign shop, I'm so glad that my husband and I saved money and prepared for me to leave my job, because it was the best decision I've ever made. Haven't ever looked back, haven't ever thought like, oh man, wish I would have stayed at that job. Like, no. Working for myself was just the best decision I could have made, but I wouldn't have been able to do it without learning all of these lessons from those crappy jobs, and like learning the value of $1, learning what hard work really is, and taking all of those skills with me into this season where I don't have a boss. I am my own boss. My couples are my bosses, yes, but I really have to like be disciplined and dictate my own schedule. And I just feel like I took so many life skills from all of those years that were harder and that were like kind of like miserable, actually. Soak in the lessons that you can learn and then take them with you into the next season, and you will just live a full life. Like, I just feel very blessed for the season that we're in. So anyways, I hope you guys liked this video, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.